Hi, Lou. Welcome.
Hi,
Thank you so much for being here. We so
my
appreciate
pleasure.
you. We had to reschedule Lou once for child illness, so
Yes.
we appreciate your flexibility and understanding that. So thank you so
That's,
much.
trust me, I remember those days.
Let's
Yeah.
say you've
Uh-huh.
been there, done that. Lou, could you start just by telling us a little bit about you, your family, kind of where you grew up, anything you'd like to share about that?
Sure, I am the oldest of five siblings. I grew up in Southern Illinois in a small town of about 3,000 people, and I wasn't quite decided what to do about college when it rolled around to that. Um, but I grew up near Scott Air Force Base, which was a large Air Force base, and most of my high school friends were Air Force brats. And so they had traveled the world, their dads had, and as a result, I just thought, there's something outside of this little town of 3,000. And maybe if I had the opportunity to join the military, I could get to see the world. It wasn't a very noble cause. I wasn't looking to save anyone. But there was a program at that time that if you had signed on to join the Army before your last year of nurses training, they would pay for your senior year, and then you owed Uncle Sam two tours of duty, basically 2 years. So that was the route that I took. In terms of personal, I've been married for 53 years. My husband is a retired attorney. We have two children, two grown children. Our daughter Jen, who is married to Matt Christensen, and they are both teachers in the Blue Valley School District. Our son Matt is married to Jen.
So, oh, I forgot about that
We
with
have a
them.
Jen and a Matt and a Jen and a Matt.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. They made that real easy. What are the
Yeah,
chances?
well, sort of. Fortunately, Matt's wife Jen, they live in Victoria, British Columbia,
Right.
so we're not always on top of each other. And her name is short for Genevieve, or Jen's short for Jennifer. So the Matts
Okay.
we can't do anything about. Um, and our daughter Jen and her husband Matt have two grandchildren, have two children who are our grandchildren, Will, who is 16, and Emma, who is 14. And that's kind of gives you a picture of where we are.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
in full disclosure, Jen is one of our favorite people. So
Jen's amazing.
we
She's
Jen is part of Kansas City Mom Collective and in our personal lives too. So
She's
I've been
wonderful.
I've been following your blog since it was
a blog.
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 Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I've been a faithful follower.
We appreciate it. So you talked a little bit about your path kind of leading to Vietnam. But when you signed on, did you think that that's where it would end up? Kind of what was the path
Yeah,
when
kind of give
you,
me I'm trying to think of the timeline of that
yeah.
too.
Okay. Well, I graduated from nurses training in 1968, in June of 1968.
Okay.
And when I decided to join the Army program, I actually signed on to the Army in 1967, so that they paid for my senior year.
Right.
And then after I graduated and took my state boards, I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, for 6 weeks of officers basic candidate school, mouthful.
Okay.
And that was 6 weeks of um, learning how to bandage, uh, playing, I guess you'd say, combat, um, crawling under, like an obstacle course, crawling under
Uh-huh.
fire, how to salute, not too difficult to do. But there was the last class I took was something about nursing in a tropical combat zone, which should have been a clue right there that maybe I wasn't going to France or Germany, which is what I had
Uh-huh.
hoped it would be.
Right.
So the first duty assignment I had after Fort Sam was Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I was there for 9 months when I got a manila envelope that said, "Congratulations, you're going to Vietnam." Um,
Wow.
I'm not sure that we celebrated that, but
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
anyway, so that's how I ended up eventually in Vietnam.
So do you remember what it felt like when you opened the envelope?
Mm.
Well, it's when I think about it, I was 21, um, and then turned 22 before I went. I think like I said, I wanted to see the world, and clearly I was going to get to see the world. I don't remember being terrified. I just remember thinking, well, I knew the consequences, and it definitely was going to be an interesting year.
Oh
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
like I said, I don't think I panicked. I'm sure my parents were less than pleased about that, but they also knew that, my dad was in the army, and when you go, you go.
Right. When you were doing your basic training, like what would you say, what was like the makeup of women to men when you were doing that?
Well, we were separate, so it was
Okay.
we didn't do all the stuff the guys did, so it was difficult to maybe figure. But just knowing the army and the military, I knew that I was with the smaller group and not with the majority of members of the military.
Right.
Hmm.
So interesting.
So when you went to Vietnam,
Yeah.
what was, I mean, I know it probably changed a lot and I've read your books, which we'll get to later, but like can you describe just a day in a life
Hmm.
as much as possible to generalize it?
Right. Right.
Okay. Well, the 9 months that I was at Fort Dix, that I think that was advantageous for me rather than going straight from officer's basic to Vietnam,
Hmm.
because the military has a way of life, and you need to get used to that. I was a young lieutenant, but the floor that I was taking care of patients on was there was a woman who had been there for 40 years. Now, technically, she had a lot more longevity, but because and she was a civilian nurse, because I was military, I was in charge. So you learn quickly the rules of the road, I guess I would say.
Hmm.
And I think it was very good that I had the time at Fort Dix to kind of acclimate to the Army.
Hmm.
In terms of Vietnam, I got 30 days of leave before I had to ship out. And
Right.
I remember my mother and my baby brother, the youngest of he was 11 years younger than I was, taking me to the airport in St. Louis, which was closest to my home, and putting me on the plane. And it's interesting because my mother told a story many years later. I had not heard this for years, that when she was returning from the airport, and you have to understand my mother, she wouldn't speed if somebody was pushing her. But apparently she got stopped for speeding after they
Oh,
dropped us off. And I guess basically the officer said, "You realize you were going over the speed limit?" She said, "Well, I thought I was just keeping up with the traffic." And he said,
fair.
"Well, a little more." And I guess then she said, "Well, I just took my daughter to the airport. She's going to Vietnam. She's an Army nurse." And so
Hmm.
he said, "Well, I won't give you a ticket now, but just slow down." So,
Good.
so
Fun.
obviously, without saying anything, my mother was a little distraught about
Yeah.
Oh,
the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
thing.
I
absolutely.
can't even fathom. Crazy. So, can you share maybe one of your most like vivid memories from your time just in the service in general and maybe tell us like how many years was that? What did that look like and what
Okay.
are one of your
The
main
tour
memories?
of duty for a nurse was a year, and
Okay.
and generally, unless you re-upped, that was your time period. Um, when I first got to Vietnam, and they asked me where I wanted to go, and I said, I don't know. I hadn't called ahead to check on the restaurants,
Right.
see who had the movie theaters and that whole
Uh-huh.
thing.
Right. Like, what were
But
your options?
well, there were several. I mean, there were lots of hospitals, but my roommate from Fort Dix, who had gone to Vietnam before I did, she was stationed at Chulai at the 91st Evac, and so I thought, well, if I requested that, at least I'd meet one person, or there'd be one person there I'd know.
Right.
And fortunately, I got it, and I could not have picked a better place. It was on a cliff overlooking the South China Sea. So when it
Oh,
was
wow.
120, it only felt like 110 because you had a little ocean breeze. Um, and the first 3 months that I worked at the hospital, I worked on a medical floor. So anything that guys came in the hospital for that were not war wounds. Malaria was rampant.
Mm,
Hepatitis from drinking dirty water and eating dirty food. Jungle rot, which is what you get when you walk in your boots, get wet, the socks get wet, and you can't change for days, and you rub big sores on your legs, and then they get infected. So anything that was that type of need to be in the hospital. After 3 months of doing that, I was asked by the chief nurse if I would take on the challenge of the emergency room. And so that's what I did for the 9 months after that, um, seeing everything from gunshot wounds to lots of amputees from stepping on landmines and tripping, falling in booby traps,
hmm.
shrapnel injuries, massive head wounds, which were the hardest to deal with because in triaging, we frequently would decide that there was no chance this young man was going to make it. And so one of the nurses would sit and hold his hand until he passed away. Um,
Mm.
but there were just any imaginable thing. I still remember the amputees. There were times they'd bring the missing limb in with them on the litter,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, there was no way, there no
To re.
miraculous way to reattach
Right.
those.
Right.
Um, but and I remember a young man who we always cut off all their clothes because it's the only way you can access assess the wounds. And we went to roll him over, and his back stayed on the litter. And we put him back down, and he managed to be airevac'd out to Japan. And I often wonder, what happened to him because there's no
Yeah.
way. And that's a frustration for all of us nurses. There's no way, there was no way to follow up in
Right.
most cases with patients.
Would you have,
Um,
when you were in the ER, would you have like a bunch of people coming in at the same time?
well, it
Or did it
varied.
seem to be more of a steady
It
stream?
totally varied.
Okay.
There were times that it would just be one or two or three in a row. One day we had 99 patients because a local village. We also took care of Vietnamese civilians. So
Okay.
um, their village was attacked, and so we had 99
Wow.
patients. Generally, there was a rule in the emergency room that if you heard more than two choppers, helicopters, come in and land on our helipad, you dropped what you were doing and went in because that meant at least two wounded and probably more like four or six. Um, and sometimes we just didn't know. There were times the single came in, but frequently it was more than one at a time.
And did you always feel, I kind of know the answer to this because, again, a plug for your book, but did you always feel like you were safe and it
That's a
was
good question.
happening away from you, or were there times where you felt like your own personal safety was at risk?
Oh, I think that the thing that most people don't realize or don't think about is that Vietnam was not the type of war where you had a front and a rear because it was jungle warfare, which meant the person who was shining your shoes, the local guy shining your shoes in the morning, could be a sniper coming to get through the concertina wire and kill you at night. So there weren't really rear areas where you were safe. As
Right.
a matter of fact, there are there were there are 8 women on the wall in Washington, D.C., and the Vietnam Memorial, and uh, one of them was killed at my hospital about 4 months before I arrived when a rocket hit the hospital. She was killed instantly, Sharon Lane. Um, so we did take fire on several occasions, and the sirens would go off, and we'd go into the bunkers. Um, and it usually was because of something that was their way of celebrating, the enemy's way of celebrating,
Hmm.
which was bombing something, um, something like Uncle Ho's birthday, Ho Chi Minh's birthday, Tet, which
Mm.
most people know about, vernal equinox, autumnal equinox, all those things were reason for them to fire rockets at the hospital.
Wow. I was wondering with hospitals, and I admittedly am not super well versed in war and military things. Is there like a rule, like an unspoken rule, like you can't attack a hospital during a war? Or is it
Well,
fair game or depend on?
it's like anything else in war, and we're seeing this in our current situation
Hmm.
around
Yep,
the world. Just because it says you should not attack a hospital or a school or whatever doesn't mean that it's not going to happen.
right.
Right.
Yep.
So there, you're always alert, and when you hear the sirens, you do what you need to do. But of course, Sharon Lane was doing what she needed to do as a nurse. I mean, she was on the ward working and stayed there to protect her men, and the rocket hit the hospital. So,
Wow.
What were some of the challenges you had being a woman when maybe it wasn't as common to have women in war? Do you think you faced unique challenges because of your gender?
well, I don't think with the people I did not find with the people I was assigned to that it was, as they say, all's fair in love and war. I
Right.
did not feel discriminated against, and I've talked about this in the past. I don't care the person that was next to me if they were of same heritage as I was, if their skin color was the same. They had my back and I had their back, and
Mhm.
that was what was important. And I know there were probably issues. I know there were issues with some of the women feeling they were, um, well, physically, I mean, mentally harassed or maybe even physically. I
Yeah.
did not experience that. And I don't know if that's just my personality or what attributed to that. But I did not, like I said, we were all there for the same reason.
Mhm. That's great. When you share your story with people, I know, which is so cool. I feel like you've gotten to and continue to share your experience in a variety of places, schools, and list goes on. What is the most surprising thing that you feel like people are surprised by?
I think number one, um, my how old I was. I was 22
Mm,
for that year that I was in Vietnam, most of it. Um, and every once in a while now, we'll see somebody, some athlete or someone really excelling at what they're doing, and I'll say to somebody, "And what were you doing at 22?" And what was I doing it? And then somebody said, "Think about it. You were doing the same stuff."
Hmm.
right.
So I think that they're frequently surprised. I think the other issue, which of course came out in Kristen Hanna's book, The Women, is that
Mhm.
there are still people that believe that there were no women in Vietnam. Duh. You have a
Hmm.
hospital.
Why? Why is that a thing?
I I I think, well, two things. I think there's still a lack of knowledge about Vietnam, which
Right.
is why I talk about it so often.
Yep.
And I think the other thing is I had as recently as 3 years ago, a guy who said to me, there weren't any women in Vietnam, and I didn't see any nurses. And I said, were you wounded? And he said, no. And I said, then you're lucky because
Hmm.
anybody who was wounded knew there were nurses in Vietnam.
Right.
So I think it just didn't occur to people that women could do that, although they've been documented in the military, well, really since the Civil War.
Hmm.
Right. Right. That's
So
fascinating. I had not heard that. I guess theory is not the right word for it, but that interesting thought for belief.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Well, and I think again, people just don't think.
Yeah.
They think about Vietnam and their buddies and their, the guys being together and stuff. Um, and of course, now that, well, we'll see what happens now.
Hmm.
When I say now, I'm speaking of 10 years ago, that women have an increasing role in the military and in combat. And so
Yeah.
I think this, between that and the publicity and things, I think there won't be as many people saying, I didn't think nurses or didn't think there were women in Vietnam.
Yeah. Nuts.
So there's obviously a lot of controversy around Vietnam.
Mhm.
So I wondered if
Mhm.
you could talk about what it was like coming home and then maybe compare that to the honor flight you got to do and what it was like coming home
Mm.
from that. Um, and just, I know that that's an important like piece of the story.
It is, and excuse me. Um, Most of us did not get any sort of welcome home at the end of our tour. And if anything, many of the returning Vietnam vets were mistreated, were spat upon, were ridiculed, were called names. I even had a friend here in the Kansas City area who had two little children when her husband was in Vietnam. He was a doctor, and when he came, and when he was over there, she was made fun of because her husband was overseas in Vietnam. So it was a political war. It was not
Mm-hmm.
a war that we were won or were going to win. It was not a war that most people didn't support the war. Um, and so it's unfortunate that we didn't get much of a homecoming. Um, I was lucky because I came back to a small town. I didn't come back to a college campus. I think I was the only or the first woman to go to war from my little town. So it was my father was, kind of proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the honor flight, which you mentioned, is I cannot say enough wonderful things about this. It is an opportunity for those of us who have been at war to go to Washington, D.C. and visit several of the monuments. And um, you board a plane, and I think there were 80 vets and 80 guardians. You had to have somebody with you. My daughter went with me. And very early in the morning, and you spend the whole day in Washington, D.C., visiting the memorials, and then you come back at night. But it includes such wonderful opportunities. And everywhere you go, at different monuments, at the airports, were groups of people wishing us well and saying welcome home. I was really impressed with the students, grade school and high school students at different locations
Hmm.
uh, saying welcome home. So, and if you wonder how you can get to see all these different monuments in one day, it's easy to do if you have about 10 motorcycle policemen blocking off every every inch of your traffic of your pathway. So, you don't have to wait in traffic. They just stop all the rest of the people in the cars and you just kind of go on ahead and do your thing. And then at the end of the day, um, there were hundreds of people at the airport in Kansas City
That's
with signs and banners and wishing us well. So it's a pretty awesome day. And if anybody knows, has a grandparent or a parent or anybody who's eligible, I would definitely encourage them to take part in an honor flight.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if you ever have the opportunity to go to the airport, just to welcome people home, like we
right.
got to go when you came home, invited by your daughter, but my mom had encouraged me because my grandpa was in World War II and never got to do an honor flight. But um, it's just a really cool experience just to see all the proud families, and there is like a band and
And
just so
before we
cool.
landed, the final feature of the flight is there
Oh
is a
yeah.
woman who is in charge of quote mail,
Hmm.
because when you are in the military, especially back in our era, you live for mail. I mean, letters, cards,
Yep.
packages, which of course now you've got email and the internet and all that stuff. But there was none of that when we were there, and you were thrilled if you got a letter, and especially if you got a
Hmm.
package. Well, this she had the guardians of everybody write to friends and say, send a letter to my
Oh,
mom.
that's cool.
And it was so cool because we got big manila envelopes full of mail, mail call.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
It's such a
What a
neat
cool thing. Has that been around for
program.
a while? You know?
well, I
I
first, I there are two groups here in Kansas City, and each of them go one in the spring and one in the fall.
Okay.
I would say 10 years, maybe more.
Okay. That is just
and you can sign up to,
fantastic.
like, my mom for a long time
Yeah,
was on a list for, like, if someone doesn't have a
Oh, like a guardian.
guardian to
Right.
guardians.
accompany them,
She could go.
sometimes volunteers will go and help.
Oh,
And
that's
Right,
nice.
yeah,
right.
it's
And
such a cool program.
they do invite people starting with those that are oldest. In other words, if you're still some World War II vets out there, they would
Yeah.
get top priority. And then from there, it's Korean war vets, and after that would be what year you served. So it's done so that we can get as many of the older people as possible.
Yeah,
That's
very
awesome.
cool. Um, okay, so I think it was a result of your service in the war, maybe, but you were
Yeah,
diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
I
Um,
was.
which can you tell us about how you came to be diagnosed, and then you have gone on to be an advocate and a champion for, research and treatment of Parkinson's. Can you just talk about that part of your kind of post-war life?
Yeah, yeah. Um, excuse me. Believe it or not, I've had this for 23 years now, which uh, I'm makes me grateful. I never dreamed when I was diagnosed that I'd live at least another 23 years. Um, there was when I was diagnosed, mainly due to hand tremor, um, slowness in walking, catching my toe on the sidewalk, things of that sort. Handwriting getting very tiny, which is strange, strange symptom, but
Hmm.
it happens. And then there are lots of other symptoms that go along with it as you progress through the disease. But I remember saying to my neurologist at the time, what would have brought this on?
Mm.
And she mentioned, she said, I did not have a history of Parkinson's, but she said there are some theories that herbicides and pesticides may play a role because there are a lot of farmers that are diagnosed with Parkinson's. Nothing in my brain said, you know, Vietnam until
Right.
8 years later. I was cruising on the internet for something, and I came across a thing that said if you were diagnosed with Parkinson's and you were exposed to Agent Orange, you could file a claim. Then the light bulb went on, and I said, that explains it. So I did file a claim then. It took me about not quite a year for them to approve it. Um, and I since know other, mostly men. There are a couple women I know with Parkinson's, but almost all of the Parkinson's patients I know are men. Um, and they, some of them were in Vietnam, some weren't. There are different reasons for developing it. But after 23 years, I said, I'm fortunate I'm still moving, not as well as I used to, but it's reached the point. What frustrates me is that my balance is right. It's now my biggest issue, and you reach the point where you have to concentrate every step you take.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you let your mind wander, if you look up and look around, you're probably going to fall.
Hmm.
And it's crucial that you develop that ability. I heard I saw a piece with Michael J. Fox's son years ago, and he said fatigue is a huge issue with Parkinson's. And he said, if you think about it, my dad, every time he does something, he has to concentrate on what he's doing. He
Right.
said, no wonder he's worn out all the time.
Yeah.
And like little kids running in front of you, if you're got a walker or a cane.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exhausting. There are lots of other symptoms that people go through. But the Parkinson's Foundation is a wonderful organization, um, and supporting research and programs and things of that sort. Um, and I've been on several committees with them, so they help. Every little bit helps.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
So interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Lou, kind of in closing, how would you say that your time serving shaped you as a person? This is a two-part question. As a
Okay.
person and then as a mom.
Okay, I would say as a person, I, I take nothing for granted,
Mm,
um, because it could be gone in a heartbeat. Um, and but I also uh, believe in the stick to itness. In other words, don't give up just because you're having a bad day. I think that is crucial. As far as my children, I would say I let them follow their dreams. Um, and I think they're both reasonably happy where they are. Maybe I would have chosen something else, but I think it's important to not discourage whatever their dreams are. Both Jen and Matt, our Jen and Matt, um, changed their minds, during college as to what they were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we had given them enough of the important part to say, okay, you don't have to, you can change your mind, but just make sure you're responsible for yourself and those who are assigned to you, like your
mhm,
children.
mhm,
So I think that I see too many times that people try to talk kids into doing something because mom or dad thinks it's a cool thing to do. And I
right.
think you have to really trust them that they're going to make the decision as to what they're going to do. And then the other thing that as a result of my military, I've taught my children, and it's why I speak, is respect for veterans and POWs. There's
Mhm,
been way too much, well, I won't say the words that have been used by
Mm-hmm.
some people, but anybody that speaks ill of veterans or POWs, especially because I know two of them, having gone back to Vietnam 4 times since the war. Um, you get no respect from me because I just can't
mhm,
tolerate that. And I do this because I want people to know that there was Vietnam and it did exist. It's so much is getting shoved under the rug these days. Like, well, maybe that didn't really happen, or we're taking so and so's name out of the history books because we don't think it was important.
Right.
History is history, and we've got to respect it, and we've got to, the saying, if something about it, if you don't respect history, you're more likely to repeat it.
Repeat
And
Oh,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Learn from, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
Ugh, amazing.
All right. So we've alluded a few times about your books. Can you tell us a little bit about those
So
and where people can find them?
I just happen to have two of
Oh,
them with me.
how handy.
let's see the covers.
The
Oh,
first one
yeah.
is called Vietnam Nurse Mending and Remembering. This one, my second, and that was published in 2015.
Okay.
This is called Unsteady as She Goes, and it was published in 2022. It's about my life with Parkinson's. And the first one is actually just about my entire year in Vietnam. And they do have pictures. It's all me. The pictures are mine. The writing, the poetry, everything is mine. There was no ghostwriter in those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
The real deal.
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's the real deal.
And people can find those probably wherever
Get
they
it?
buy their books,
Yeah,
right?
and
Okay.
that's it. And on Amazon as well, and they can buy them out of the back of my car.
Okay.
We'll give everybody your address and everything.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I can vouch for them and say that they're very like reads that you won't put it down and very quick, like just great storytelling and a lot of stories you didn't tell us here, but
Yeah.
very captivating storytelling. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you. I have to admit that thanks to Kristen Hanna, my book sales and speaking commitments are
uh,
way up because people are saying the minute her book was printed, The Women came out,
yeah.
and I read it and realized that she was describing a woman in a bathing suit that she had to have read my book because I'm wearing the exact suit she described. But I knew people started calling me and saying, Lou, we need to talk. We need to talk. So they wanted to know how authentic. And it is an excellent book, I will say that.
It is
But it is historical fiction. So
fiction.
you
Yeah.
have
Right.
to keep that in
Right.
mind.
So, did you ever get to talk to Kristen Hannah?
I have not, and
Okay.
I've written several things there. I have not heard back, but I keep thinking sooner or later when I tell the story about the two-piece red belted bathing suit, uh, and if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We'll put two and two together.
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, you've had quite the circuit, the speaking circuit. I
Yeah.
feel like every library, every school, you've been a hot commodity for the
Yeah.
speaking after that book came out.
Oh,
My
yeah.
husband calls me a rock star, and I said, if I'm a rock star, why am I still doing the dishes and taking out the trash?
Amen. 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 Lou, do you have somewhere where, like, if somebody wanted to know, and are you still like actively speaking and presenting now?
Oh
Like, if
yeah.
somebody wanted to come hear you
Yes.
speak somewhere, is there somewhere that people could go to find that information?
The challenge is that some of the things like I'm speaking to DAR groups,
Hmm.
book clubs, and unless it's something that they say I've got wide open space and you can invite anybody.
Right.
Um,
Totally.
and I've got 5 coming up. I think one in November may be a wide open. But you can share my email if you'd like to do that.
Okay.
Can you do
Okay.
that?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm always on email, and if anybody's interested, um, uh, that would be a good way to get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to stay in touch with whoever it is and
You need
let
a
them know.
fan page.
Yeah, you do.
Get those grandkids to
Get
make
those
you a
grandkids to-
fan page with all your
Oh,
speaking engagements.
yeah.
Seriously.
It's true.
Very, very cool. Lou, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
everything. Thank you for your service, first of all, most importantly, and then thank you for sharing your time and some of your story with us.
My pleasure.